Hello, everybody. I'm John Griffiths with the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics, and we have a wonderful panel here today for our members and for our fans out there. Debuting December 6th on Hulu is the documentary special We Live Here, which follows the lives of several LGBTQIA+ families living in the heart of the Midwest. And this is all as anti-queer sentiment and legislation are rapidly multiplying across the country, as we all know in this era of DeSantis and certain strange right-wing organizations that produce animated history guides. It's just very odd, the times that we are living in, kind of dystopian. All the things we have heard before, they're true. It's awful. Anyway, so the subjects in We Live Here are planted in the Midwest, but for how long, we're not sure, but they're raising kids there, which is, you know, that's great. It's a beautiful film and very well made and upbeat, but not twee, if you will. And today we have with us Iowa natives Nia and Katie and Nebraska settlers Monte and Mario, and the Filmmakers' first-time director and executive producer, Melinda Maerker? Maerker. I'm sorry about that, but I was trying to get that. I went to the pronunciation, page on the internets, and it was not helpful.
It's the German pronunciation, which gives people a sore throat, so we just drop the A.
Okay, gotcha. I'm of German descent myself, so hey. And executive producer David Miller. David's a longtime celebrity and advertising biz photographer who was an inspiration for Andrew Rannells' character in husband Ryan Murphy's Dorian award-winning sitcom The New Normal, which was about a gay married couple preparing to raise a surrogate baby. And David himself has, I think, 3 children. So to start here, a little bit more about you, Melinda, as a first-time filmmaker, and how did you meet David, and why did you two decide this was the story that you wanted to tell first out the gate?
Well, David and I had been working on a project a while back about LGBTQ families, and it was very sweet. It was a video photography project, and 2016 came. So what had felt like a rather straightforward, joyful, yay, marriage equality series of videos suddenly turned into, oh my goodness, there's this wave of backlash. It comes with great discrimination, and we should look at how our families are faring throughout the country. But we started in the Midwest primarily because it is known as the Heartland of American family values. And what does that mean? And family values, as we know, is a term that's been pretty much co-opted by the right. And we wanted to bring it back to the center, literally, and say, okay, what does this really mean? Family values at heart, we hope, means be kind, be aware of your neighbor. And we were finding that, ironically, many people were not applying those values to LGBTQ+ families. So that was a way we wanted to get to the heartland. We wanted to look at the repercussions of what was happening politically, but we wanted to do it specifically through a very straightforward storytelling. Please, engage in this film and root for these people.
Right.
And what's interesting.
Oh, sorry, David.
I'm sorry.
This is a little, I'll shut up in a second, but it's just thank you guys for finding that co-opt, if you will.
Yeah, and what we didn't realize at the time of filming to where we are today at the release in 2 days is the backlash has grown. It's much larger. This year alone saw over 400 anti-gay and anti-trans bills being introduced into legislation. And think about this: the number 3 most powerful individual in government has well-documented antagonistic and discriminatory views about the very people featured in our film. I mean, we've come a long way from when marriage equality was passed to the threat that we are facing today. And to be honest with you, I'm shocked. I'm looking for Larry Kramer. I don't know where the next Larry Kramer is, because it's shocking to me how much the right wing and conservatives have gotten away with. And there's very little opposition or very little news about it. So it's interesting that, we filmed this then wanting to talk about some backlash and discrimination that was still existing. It's gotten worse 2 years later.
Right. Yeah, no, I think we're all shocked, and we have to get out of that shock to do things like what you're doing here. There should be like a national advertising campaign from the Ad Council on what are real American values, and love, respect, understanding, helping each other, and fighting that, how the Speaker of the House, is somebody that believes in conversion therapy. It's just, it's disturbing anyway. So how did you find these Mario and Monte and Nia and Katie and the other subjects in particular? And were there some that you didn't, that said, no, thank you?
Well, yes, starting with that, there were several who said, no, thank you, mostly for the reason because they feared, rightly so, recrimination within their communities or at their job, and that's their livelihood. So this is why we call our families who participated very courageous in sharing their stories, in bringing those forward to a much larger audience than we had necessarily anticipated. But yes, it's a complicated process finding families to participate, just finding families. So we went through social media networks, we went through other LGBTQ+ organizations, and sometimes we just went through friends of friends of friends, as was the case with Nia and Katie.
Gotcha. And David, did you have any, I guess as executive producer, did you help cast this?
Yeah, I mean, Melinda and I worked together in terms of, who were we going to narrow down to? What type of story arcs was Melinda going to create? It's a very much collaborative process.
And are either of you from the Midwest? I think, David, you're from LA, but Melinda, where are you from?
I grew up in Tucson, but I was born in Ohio, and all of my extended family were in Ohio. Many of them still are. And then my parents did whisk me away as a baby from the cold to the desert. So, but yes, I think, we would go back to the Midwest, and it was such a different culture from where I was growing up that I noticed even as a small child, the differences.
Yeah. And the Midwest is almost like archetypal. It's not necessarily, the states that Wikipedia says it is. It could be, the Northwest or whatever, but it's just sort of a mentality where you would think that people would be sort of homespun, and here's some apple pie, but there's a layer of hate in the apple pie with some people, and then also fierce, I don't care about any of that. I love you, So were there, for Mario and Monte, in being in Nebraska, what were the most extreme types that you met going in both directions? Like people that shocked you, that were like, wow, they are super loving. I never would have thought that.
I think that brings a great point, which was highlighted in the film, is our neighbors, which are so different from us in almost every way, between our races, our sexualities, political views. And I think so many people were kind of shocked of how close we are, even still to this day, with our neighbors, which is, you ask, well, how is that so? Because they're, at one point in time, that I know they for sure did vote for Trump. And it was, for a while, we never even discussed politics, even after that, because we know how that can go when you talk about, like, within your neighborhood, your family, friend groups, things like that. So, but eventually we had a conversation about it, and we were able to have a conversation without, chopping each other's heads off, or, for better words. But we actually listened to each other. And one of the things that shocked me the most about that conversation was I believe one of our neighbors, she said to us, you know, this is just the way that she decided to vote for that the particular person was it was something that was embedded with her from her childhood. And which lets me know, like, you know, especially as a therapist, you see it as like a lot of times we either conform to our parents, you know, beliefs or views, or we go quite opposite of that. And that was an example of, well, it was just kind of what the family did, and I just continued on with it, where, you know, whether I agree with everything that that person said or not, I just went with it. But I think the biggest thing is being able to connect with them, just to see them as people, which is what we want to be seen as people, outside of our sexualities or our differences. We're people just like you. So that, I think that's most extreme on that side. But what would you say the negative would be?
I don't think I know we have, but
Our surrogates,
our surrogates
family
was pretty pretty
homophobic and racist.
Yeah, to the point of like, hey, you have a black baby inside of you, type of
But he didn't use the word black. He used the N word.
Just for this.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, that's.
I mean, the neighbors, you know, their neighbors were a very important feature in the Nebraska segment, because one of the you know, I think we're in such a political divide in this country right now, and I think it's really important to show an example of people who can vote different politically on the political spectrum, but can still sort of have some type of respect for one another. And I don't think we're seeing that right now. So to be able to sort of show that in a film, hopefully perhaps give some hope to people that we can coexist amongst each other without necessarily voting for the same president.
Sure. And well, I was going to ask Mario, and you already answered the question here, you two. I was going to ask if you felt like your life has become a sitcom, but it sounds like more of a searing drama.
Yeah.
This new normal of yours.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just even before all that, you know, we'd go to our surrogate's cousin's house for their cousin's dinner, and you'll see that on the film as well. But every time we go there, it's always, we kind of feel like we're the center of attention as far as what it's like being black and doing this, or being black and gay. So what does that mean? And we're always like the center of like a topic. It's like, hey, let's just play hand and foot cards, you know, and just enjoy our time, instead of, you know, talking about all parts of the spectrum of race or sexuality and all that.
Right. Well, time will probably change change things. You know, the more you hang out with somebody, I guess.
Yeah. ...
Nia and Katie, you're both from Des Moines?
Yes.
Yep.
And you've known each other since second grade.
Yes.
And you have how many kids?
5.
Wow. There's a sweet animated depiction of how you explain to your kids, and kudos to David and Melinda for that great animated moment where it sort of goes along with how you described, you know, the revelation to your children. And could you just go over that a little bit, Nia, maybe?
Yeah. So when I came home and talked to Katie about my own identity as a trans woman, you know, we went through a process together. And when we got to the point where we had to tell the kids, I was still like, how are we supposed to do this? I'm not sure what to do here. And Katie just jumped in and said, well, I'll just draw them a picture. And you see that depicted so well in the film. And we have used that. I'll let Katie speak to kind of her thought process, but we've used that with our kids, with our friends' kids. We've handed it to other people to use because it is so powerful in showing the simplicity. And the fact that our kids said, oh, yeah, I get it. Okay. Also shows, you know, the resiliency and kind of the lack of boxes that have been built in their minds already.
Right. Well, I love it. You know, we're not just our bodies. You know, we've got brains too. Katie, did you want to add to that at all, or?
I mean, I think it just came so natural because our kids are naturally curious. And we're naturally curious. And I was making sense of everything myself. And so I just was saying, this is how I'm making sense of things. I do want to also say one thing that I forgot to include when we were talking about it was the inclusion of intersex people inside of that spectrum as well. That I think it needs to be said out loud. That also exists, which we talk to our kids about as well, because that is such an important part still of the queer community, the LGBTQ community, is that we understand that there's not a binary. There really is a large spectrum. And that was important for us with our kids, that they understand that all bodies, all people, all souls are different and run along a spectrum. And we've always wanted them to know that, because it keeps us from conflict with each other. It allows us to say, where are the points where we are similar? Where can we come together? And how can I teach you about me? And how can you teach me about you?
Right. And it's interesting how, people say I'm trying to figure this out. You don't necessarily have to figure it out. You can just go, okay, I'm not in your shoes. I just trust what you're saying, and that's interesting.
Right.
And David and Melinda, did you attempt to get some of the church members in the film just for their comments, or other family members that I guess you kind of said a little bit earlier, but were there people that beyond subjects, peripheral people that said, no, thank you, I'm not going to talk about this?
Well, typically the response was, and I think if I made with Mario and Monte, it was kind of at their church in Nebraska. The response was, it felt like a don't ask, don't tell. So we were wanting, honestly, to have that point of view, to include that point of view, as we did with their lovely neighbors who have different views and were able to, talk to us about their relationship with Mario and Monte. We were hoping that someone, honestly, from their church would be able to speak to that as well, how we accept these people, but yet we may also hold these views, and that contradiction and what it looks like. We did, as you noticed in the film, we did, and I'm so glad he did this. Nia's brother, Chris, was able to speak to, some of that difficulty in being in a middle position, bridging the gap, as Katie says, between the family and Nia's parents and sister. So I think it's difficult to include people who may feel that we don't necessarily want to represent them well, which is not the case. You want to spark conversation.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, there were other segments where we reached sort of across the aisle, and they either refused or didn't want to speak, or in some cases, similar to we reached out to the ex-wife, in Deb and Jen's case in Minnesota. She, I thought, provided a really poignant view of what it's like, the aftermath.
Yeah, that's an excellent portion, and it says something to the filmmakers that you were able to get people to feel so comfortable and honest. How did you do that? Is it just your amazing, congenial spirits, or did you pray before going in? I don't know,
Well, I mean, I think that's a question we should ask the participants here. But for me, it was really genuinely wanting to get to know people, and a curiosity, and also a respect and an awareness of what, stories are a gift, and honoring the fact that people are giving you this gift of their story, and knowing that you're going to put it out there and shape it into a narrative that people can follow and end up rooting for the participants, and where we were ultimately going with that. But I think it's a good question. I'm curious for
Sure,
myself,
take it over, ask them.
Yeah, no one said, ooh, I don't want to talk to you, and hung up the phone. That didn't happen, thank goodness. But I said, but it was more issue based when people didn't want to speak to us. It was a discrimination issue. So yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, Katie and Nia, why did you feel comfortable in this case? And were there points where you're like, oh God, I don't know if I'm comfortable talking about this, but you did.
What do you think? I mean, I think we felt comfortable because we are vulnerable people. We live our life very openly, because we agree with Melinda and David that story is what changes hearts and minds. That, I was a pastor and a preacher for a long time, and I could preach 1,000 sermons. It's not the same as sitting down with someone and telling them my story. And we really saw that when Nia came out, because I was preaching a lot of sermons about this kind of love, but the story of Nia coming out, was so different. So when walking that was really so different. So when Melinda and David wanted to come and tell that story, it could have been so intimidating, but it was really beautiful because Melinda sat and looked me in the eye and asked me questions no one had asked me, was able to really connect with Nia. And Nia and I were just talking the other day, as it was so beautiful that David spent 2.5 hours in our basement with our kids, just trying to keep them quiet. And so it's one of those things that, like, all of a sudden you went from complete strangers with two people to two people who immediately you felt we're going to take care of you. And there was never a time where we were like, oh, they're really going to skew our story. We knew they wanted to tell a story that was ours, and we feel like they did.
So Melinda has a very special way of making people feel comfortable. She's sometimes a little bit quirky, but she really, at essence, is a very vulnerable person, and really makes you feel warm and engaging. And so I applaud Melinda for those abilities to do that.
Well, there's such wonderful subjects in the film. I'm sorry, Mario, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of wanted to kind of say something on that. So, our chief of the Air Force, she has this quote about diversity when it comes to asking someone to the dance. It's okay to ask someone to the dance, then the next level is just dancing with them. And I really just love that quote, because especially in the Black community, in our culture, especially if you're in a church and you're approached about homosexuality and whatever LGBTQIA+, if that's going to be brought up into another light, I feel like in our culture it's an automatic shutdown, because they don't want to be viewed as oh yeah, this church supports them, so we can no longer support with them. So it feels like that. And after Linda had said what you said about not being able to reach out to the church in Nebraska, I really wish that they were able to express their views, because they took in on us so differently than the church in Colorado. Same exact style, same exact culture, same exact everything, but they had a completely different reaction for us, especially after the Ellen show, especially after the being out there in the public in Omaha. They still allowed us to minister. They still allowed us to do things. And I would love to hear why and how they kept that going for us.
Yeah, because we've always been curious about that, because at least for myself, leaving from the church that we came from, it was like, I've always wanted to know, like, what are people's views? It can't be the whole church. It can't be everyone. And because we've seen love from people that know about us and that know about our journey, our lifestyle, and they have not given us that shunness or the ostracizing type of verbiage. So why the difference? And so it would have been nice for sure to hear where they stand, not the fact that we're trying to change how they should church, but just the fact that we're preaching love. How are we able to now see it also?
Right. Colorado is, of course, the land of Matthew Shepard and the anyway. So, okay, before I let some of our members who ask some questions if they'd like, I wanted to ask Melinda and David, where do you think, beyond the sort of human fear of difference, what do you think is fueling this resurgence of hate, or more, out in the open, sort of movement almost. Well, it is a movement. Where is it coming from? Is it money? Is it greed? Is it Putin? Do you have any theories?
I mean, listen, well, one, we had a president that, made fun of people on the national stage and criticized people. And I think that emboldened a lot of people to be able to say, well, if he can do it, I can do it too. I think there's also a lot of fear and ignorance that exists. I think people don't necessarily really understand what it's like to be gay or what a gay family is. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to highlight, because we wanted to say, hey, listen, America and the world, these are gay families. They have issues just like you do. Financial concerns, they have health issues. They're really not much different than your family. They love their children just as much as you love yours. And, I think that people, Melinda can share a great story that we had, that somebody came up to her after the premiere that we had here in Los Angeles. I think if we can sort of inform and enlighten people in an entertaining way to say, hey, here are families that are really just like yours. There's really nothing to fear.
And I think, and Nia said this early on in the film, and it always struck me and stuck with me, that we're not issues, we're people. And I think often there's fear, and there's also just a failure of thinking things through. It can be convenient to support certain issues that may be valid and benign, but then forgetting that if you're supporting someone who holds those issues, and they also hold these beliefs and values that are very discriminatory, that isn't an issue. You're voting against essentially these people, you're excluding them. So, as David was bringing up, my partner at our premiere in Los Angeles brought her cousin, who's lovely, but very much supports Trump. And I thought, well, this will be interesting. And she, after the premiere, said, first of all, as she said, I really enjoyed the film. It was entertaining and to the point of stories. Good, bring people into something they enjoy. But then she said afterwards that she thought she needed to think more deeply about specifically respecting LGBTQ+ people. And I thought, well, that's a lovely consequence. Again, the film isn't meant to be preachy in any way. It's not meant to tell people how they should or should not think or believe. But if in falling into these stories and rooting for the participants, you happen to begin to question why you think the way you do, why you have just not thought about this community, then that's a great consequence. It's a hopeful consequence.
What I love, a moment where, is it Jennifer that you see her at a putting range with one of her daughters, and she is perfectly fine, or seems to be, with her kids calling her dad. And I thought that just said a lot, that, no hands are being put up. It's just, she has a relationship with these girls that say they've come around, they love their mom, but their mom is to them dad. And that's just that was a sweet moment to me. Mario and Monte, are you still in Nebraska?
No, so we're currently in Hawaii right now. So obviously for the last, most of our lives together has been in the Midwest. So that's all we've kind of known of our adult life, because I got stationed there when I was in the service, and then he's from the Midwest with his family. And a lot of times we've gotten asked, like from some of the people post premiere, like, what's the huge difference, and like, that type of thing. And one of the things that what I really appreciate with David and Melinda is including us in this in a manner of that we can also be a beacon to people also in our community. It's, when I say community, I mean like the African-American community, because a lot of people have reached out saying, oh, like, what is that like? And we were like, well, we're just creating it. And one of the things that we always say is sometimes we have to be our own reference points that we want to see. And we don't really see it that much, let alone, I mean, we rarely see it as like a same-sex couple, but break it even down further as an African-American couple, both of us African-American, we don't really see it. And so I love the fact that we have been able to not necessarily speak for all of our community, but be there for those who are in search of what does that look like. And so I love that so much. And, you know, being in a different state now, we're able to see it, it just feels different. It feels different, but we still don't see it, if that makes sense. And we're literally in the rainbow state. If you know what I mean, like literally it's called the rainbow state, and we still don't see it. And we're pretty out there. We get out in the community, and you know, we went to the Pride event, and I'm like, I see all these beautiful couples and LGBTQ, but where are we? Like, again, so it's not to say that, you know, all of it is beautiful, but it's still like, I know we exist somewhere, but where are we? And so I really appreciate David and Melinda for giving us this opportunity. I can't say any more words than that.
That's great.
You know, I wanted to just reiterate one more time, you know, we're in such a political divide right now. And I think that this film really provides a wonderful opportunity for people to see these people as just normal people and to treat them with decency. And I think that's really important to get across, because I think that there's a real threat to the LGBT community right now. And I think, you know, as Secretary Buttigieg has come out and said, you know, he would welcome House Speaker Mike Johnson into his home to see how he and Chasden, you know, raise their kids. We're inviting the world into these homes here, these people's homes, to see how they raise their kids. And I mean, you know, Katie to me is a rock star. I wish I had a parent like Katie. I mean, you know, I can't wait for people to see her.
Yeah, well, you know, obviously the Midwest, or maybe not obviously, but the Midwest is sort of a euphemism in this film. It's in the Midwest could be the rural South or just the South. It could be Tehran. You know, it's sort of but not at the same time, because there are the values that you were talking about. And Katie and Nia, can you speak to the goodness of, you know, the land that you're in right now?
Yeah, well, we also ended up moving recently. But we spent all of our lives in Iowa, and the people there are good. You know, I think one of the things we learned really early on, and myself in particular, as I came out, was not to judge other people, because their reaction to who I am a lot of times surprised me in very good ways. And I think I really realized that systems are at work here, at play on the people who generally are very amazing people.
I know, Nia and Katie, you both said that being outside of the Midwest and where you particularly are, there was just, and tell me if I'm getting this right, a sense of ease. It was like you could breathe a little better. Is that accurate?
Yes, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think I said at the premiere, like, there's this hum, this static, this buzz in the Midwest that's always there. I'm thinking about restrooms. I'm thinking about going to the grocery store, who's watching me at the gas pump, all of that. And that is just not here on the East Coast where we are in Baltimore. You know, differences are much more acceptable. And so that back level hum has really lowered, and it lowers the stress of everyday life.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much. I think one of the big key is to take the money out of hate. And yeah, there's just a lot of money in hate. So thank you, everybody. I so appreciate this, and congratulations.
Thank you very
around
much.
you, as my grandmother used to say. And that's the scoop. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.